Hey, I'm Dr. Antonio Grisef over here in the wrestling room in Mongolia, and I'm talking about my new book. It's called The Wushu Doctor, an American at Shanghai University of Sport, and it's about the 3 years I spent on a wrestling scholarship in China. In 2012, I was teaching at Shanghai University, and I stopped off at Shanghai University of Sport to ask if I could wrestle there, and they wound up offering me a scholarship to do my PhD. China has this sports school system where kids start out at a very young age. They're often taken away from their parents or they leave their parents to go live in a sports school, and they train in martial arts or they train in all the different Olympic sports. There's what they call the Tishao, which are the sports schools, which also have very often martial arts components inside of them. So the kids would be learning all of the Olympic sports. They would also be learning wrestling and also be maybe learning Wushu and Chinese sports. And then there's a separate school system called the Wushao, which is just for martial arts. So these kids leave home at an early age to go train in sports, go train in martial arts, and a very few of them will become professional athletes. A very few of them will become Olympic athletes. A lot of them will wind up with absolutely nothing and just be turned out on the street at some point if they're injured or when they turn 18 and they're too old to remain in the school. They don't get a very good education there. However, China has 7 sports universities, and a few of them will get to go study in the sports university. So the kids that you meet in the sports universities are kids that grew up generally in the Tishao or the Wushao. They grew up in the sports schools or the Kung Fu schools, and then they go on to the sports university. And they study for a bachelor's degree. And of course, they offer master's and PhD. Now, the irony was that I was coming in with an academic bachelor's degree, an academic graduate degree, so I was able to go into a PhD program. Most of my teammates at the university would not qualify to go on for a master's because they were coming in with sports credentials rather than academic credentials. So Shanghai University of Sport is the number 2 sport university in China. Beijing TU is number 1, and Shanghai is number 2, but it's number 1 in research. It's the number 1 for academics and for research, but it's number 2 in terms of sports training. Inside of Shanghai University of Sport, there is a Wushu Institute, and that's where I studied. That's why my book is called The Wushu Doctor, because I did my doctorate there, and it was in the Wushu Institute. But inside the Wushu Institute, they offer several majors. There is Taolu, which is the Wushu performance martial art. There's Tai Chi, which of course is an internal martial art. There's also Qigong, and there's a lot of overlap. So you'll see students that are studying Wushu and Tai Chi. They'll officially be majoring in one or the other, but there's a lot of overlap between students that were doing both. And the regular Wushu students, if they were doing Taolu or Tai Chi, they also had to learn weapons. And when they had tests, they would have to do tests with both with and without weapons. And of course, we had written exams and all that. The other major that they offered inside of the Wushu Institute was Sanda, which is Chinese kickboxing, which allowed throwing but no ground fighting. So it wasn't really like MMA. Shuaijiao, which is Chinese wrestling. So for me, when I got there, I knew that either Sanda or Shuaijiao was going to be the thing that suited me best with my MMA background. And I really wanted to learn to wrestle. You know, ever since I got into MMA, I wanted to have proper wrestling training. I never had proper wrestling training. I just had whatever wrestling training we could pick up when I lived in the MMA academy in Malaysia. And so I decided to major in wrestling, and I was going to write my doctoral dissertation on all the different forms of grappling, wrestling that are done in China, and that included Sanda. So I took probably as many, if not more, Sanda classes than I did wrestling. In fact, I did take a lot more Sanda classes than wrestling classes. Also, because of the politics within the university, that every Wushu student had to take Sanda classes. So about, I don't know, maybe 2/3 of the students at the university were taking Sanda classes. And then every PhD student had to take Sanda Godo, which is Sanda with ground fighting. So I took a lot of Sanda. And this is Sanda. This is not wrestling right here, but this is learning to do the takedowns. The takedowns in Sanda are based on Shuai Jiao. But now, of course, they're using a lot of also techniques that they're taking from other places like freestyle wrestling, Greco-Roman wrestling. But there's a lot in there that's based on Shuai Jiao as well. So actually, it worked out really well studying the two arts together. And we had these really big Sanda classes. Sometimes there would be uh, I don't know, 30, 40 kids or more in a Sanda class. And there were Sanda classes going on literally all day, just every hour, all day, from morning until evening. There were Sanda classes, and there were 5 days a week. And so if you wanted to do Sanda, there was just unlimited opportunities and tons and tons and tons of people to spar with. The only downside was that because Sanda was required for everybody to take, so when you went in there, there was a huge disparity in ability in terms of like trying to find sparring partners and all that. So the guy here, Mape, that's my friend, and he was a professional Sanda fighter. So he and I, from my very first Sanda class, we paired up, and then we became really good friends and training mates, and we were pretty close in size. But a lot of the kids in there were like, Wushu majors, Tai Chi majors, or something. So you didn't really want to, spar with them too much because you don't want to hurt them. And there were also kids from other majors. So I remember there was a kid that was a swimming major, and he was this huge guy. So they paired me with him, but then it turned out he was a swimming major. And it's like, well, yeah, I can't really spar with a swimming major. And then on my second year at the university, I started training Greco-Roman wrestling. So one of the weird anomalies at Shanghai University of Sport was that they didn't have men's freestyle wrestling. They had women's freestyle and they had men's Greco. And I was not allowed to train on the Greco team because I was not what they considered a professional athlete within the university. I was a professional athlete, and when I competed in Sanda, they made me sign up for the professional division. But what they considered a professional athlete within the university meant you were actually on the university team, and I couldn't be on the Greco team. And also, they wouldn't allow a foreigner to do that. So I was not allowed to train Greco with the team. I was not a professional athlete as they understand professional at the university, which means you basically just do sports and you don't do any academics. And then you have to qualify to be on the team. So I wasn't able to do Greco. So I did Shuai Jiao. And then the second year, I made an agreement with one of the coaches and I had private Greco training for the rest of the time I was at the university. I was there for 3 years. And this is my private Greco coach. Yeah, he taught me so much. Greco is so interesting because you're not allowed to use your legs. You're not allowed to trip the guy. You can't grab the legs. It's a lot of upper body strength. Now, in addition to training, we had all these academic classes, and there's a lot more coursework in a PhD at the sports university than there would be in a lot of other PhD programs. A lot of PhD programs only have 2 or 3 courses that are required. I've taught in PhD programs, and they only had 2 or 3 required classes. But at Shanghai University of Sport, we had a full schedule of academic classes, and we also had to train. And so I might have in a given day like 3 training sessions or more sometimes, very occasionally, maybe even 4. But a typical day would be like PhD level Sanda class in the morning, which is training, then a bunch of lecture classes, sitting in a classroom, taking notes, listening to lectures. And this is all in Chinese, 100% taught in Chinese. And then maybe in the afternoon, I might have like strength training or I might have wrestling. And then late that evening, I might have another Sanda class. Sanda classes went on until about 9:30 at night. I think the final classes maybe started around 8 p.m. and they went to 9:30. And occasionally we had wrestling practices that were late at night like that, particularly on Friday nights. There was a wrestling practice. It was like 8 p.m. to 9:30 or something like that. And it's all in Chinese. I had to write reports. I had to do research. I had to give presentations. There's a lot of presentations in this university. And then after 3 years, you defend your dissertation just like you would at any other university. And I passed my defense and I graduated. So the book is called The Wushu Doctor. It's available on Amazon.com, and it is taken from my diary during my 3 years at Shanghai University of Sports. So this is the Wushu Doctor year 1. It's about the first year at the sports university. But I mean, it was just an insane, amazing, wonderful experience, to be a foreign student in China, a PhD student at a sports university, to walk in that first day, everybody's Chinese, all the classes are in Chinese. I'm the only foreigner. And yeah, it was overwhelming. It was daunting. It was really difficult academically, struggling through all the exams and papers and presentations and things like that. And then also the physical training. I was about 46 years old when I walked into the university. So it was really unusual to have somebody that old training in sports and fighting and wrestling. They had never had a foreigner on wrestling team before, so that was new to them. I was the first American and the 15th foreigner to ever complete the PhD in Wushu at the university. And the Wushu program was decades old by that point. And so I think they'd had 115 PhD students graduate, and I was number 15 of foreigners. I guess I was the 115th graduate as well. And I was the 15th foreigner, first American. But it was an incredible experience. And as a result, I went on to postdoctoral studies in economics, and I became an economics professor. And now I'm teaching at the American University in Mongolia, and I'm still wrestling in Mongolia because I love wrestling and I still want to keep competing. So it's called The Wushu Doctor Year One. It's available on Amazon.com. I hope you'll enjoy it. I'm Dr. Antonio Graceffo. Keep training and keep reading. It's got everything. It's got communism, it's got martial arts, it's got wrestling, and it's got Wushu. Anyway, I hope you enjoy the book.